Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me once again, Shinna. It is good to have you back on.
Good to be here.
All right, man. So yeah, this is Norse Magic Part Two. It was a very good conversation last time, but yeah, let's talk about the nature of Loki. Now, Loki is. Some people say he's half giant. Some people say he's full giant. But it's true that his father was a giant. Is that true?
Um, I'm starting to find doubts because like a lot of the stuff that I've looked up doesn't all add up. But the one thing that gets most confused when it comes to Loki is there's a part in one of the poems that talks about how him and Odin are brothers. But the reason it brings that up is it sounds more like they did a blood brother ritual.
Okay.
Uh, it doesn't sound like they were actually brothers because they don't have the same mother, and the only thing that's ever really mentioned about him is his mother. um, and when it comes to the type of entity he is, he's clearly a Jotun. Odin is a Jotnar. Thor is a Jotnar. They're all giants. Technically, it's kind of like rectangles and squares. All squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. In this instance, the term giant is a rectangle,
Right.
and the Aesir are the squares. It's all the Aesirs are essentially of the Jotnar variety, but when you listen to a lot of the different stories and you read them and actually really think about it, they talk about all kinds of different giants and their different tribes, their different kingdoms that exist in that realm. And so because of that, it's safe to say that they're not all the same tribe. I mean, if you look at it from a non-occult perspective, the Jotun are basically just elements of nature, like the winds, all the way from a light breeze all the way up to a huge hurricane gale wind force.
Right.
You know, stuff that rips up trees. They even talk about the Jotnar as if they're the mountains themselves. But they don't talk about them like they're trees. They talk about them as if they're the raw forces of nature. And because of that, it's one of those things that it's kind of interesting. What would Loki be? When you look into a lot of it, most people think he's the trickster god, and so he's the one that's causing all the mischief. But the more you read into it, like I listened to a lot of Ocean Keltoy, and one of his videos talked about how Loki's not really a bad guy. We even talk about it in our Kindred that Loki's not really the bad guy. He's kind of the unsung anti-hero in the group. But none of his sagas does he ever actually lie. He never tells a lie. He often holds everybody else accountable. So it's like, well, you said, or what I said was, and then he'll say exactly word for word how it was placed, and therefore I can only be held accountable to my exact word. And he does this a lot in those stories. And because of that, I'm actually more inclined to think of Loki as kind of the lawyer of the Aesir. He's the guy that does everything word for word verbatim. He's I guess if you use D&D terms, he's the rule Nazi. He's if you don't follow it to the letter, you're the asshole. And he holds everyone, even Odin, accountable.
Okay, that makes a little more sense when you take a look at the lore and stuff like that. Because see, when you take a look at everything, at times he's helpful to the Asgardians, and then other times he causes trouble. So, like, take for instance, like during Ragnarok, which those who are watching may not know is the apocalypse. He leads the giants into battle against the Asgardians. You know, so this would you say he leans more towards helpful towards the Asgardians or more against the Asgardians?
I wouldn't say either, honestly, because
Yeah.
after listening to that same video I told you by Ocean Keltoy,
Right.
like I'm not sponsoring him. I've never met the guy, but he made a really good argument in that, and it was the fact that he's kind of more of a god of accountability. Because if you think about it, every single time one of the gods is acting up or doing something crazy, he's kind of like, yeah, but you can't do that because you did say this. He does that a lot. And it also gets him in trouble too, because we've all had that friend that's like, that's not what I said. I said da 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 da. Okay, that's a technicality. We all know what you meant. Yeah, but what I said was, and we find those types of people rather annoying, but at the same time, they do make valid points.
They may be necessary, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I thought was interesting about I was taking a look at some of his children, and I took a look at the children he had with his mistress. So you had what's that?
Angerbotha.
Yeah. So you had one of the children was Hel, who ruled the underworld, and then you had I think it's Jormander, who was a giant sea serpent, who was the archenemy of Thor.
Jormungandr.
And then there was, I think it was Fenrir, who was a wolf that is said to is going to kill Odin during Ragnarok. Now, would you say that's consistent?
Consistent with what?
As far as like, would you say that that's accurate?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
that's what the stories say, and that's what's supposed to happen.
Right. All right. And now they say that he's supposedly pinned. Loki is pinned in some rocks underground with a poisonous serpent the gods put above his head and drips painful venom onto Loki's face, causing earthquakes on the earth. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
And that serpent that is pinned up, it's he's tied with the entrails, I believe, of that same serpent, and the serpent is tied up on the rocks above him and dripping venom onto him, and his wife, one who's catching the venom, which allows him to rest. But that serpent is also one of his children. Like that's how far the Aesir went. So that's
I see. Okay.
It's probably the straw that broke the camel's back and why he leads the charge against the Aesir. Like they didn't kill his other kids; they just kind of kicked him out of the club. All right, fuck guys. And so, the more it goes down the line, it's more likely to believe that he starts drinking further down and becomes kind of the alcoholic asshole because what's the fucking point? No matter what I do, they're gonna keep my kids out. So
yeah, because like the whole reason he got put there was like he crashed a party and started pointing out certain things. Yeah, started running his mouth, started pointing out certain things, and he's like, well, I was responsible for this and that. And they're like, okay, this guy's causing trouble. Let's throw him down there, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess so according to the lore and everything, would you say that he's just waiting there until Ragnarok to lead the charge of the giants against the Asgardians? Is he just waiting there for that?
Pretty much. That's what I would believe, yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about shape-shifting. Now, if I don't pronounce this right, go ahead and feel free to correct me. So it's called Hamramer?
Hammer?
Or Hammer. Now, I'm going to say, first of all, as far as, shape-shifting goes, I've seen a skinwalker myself. So I can say that, I do believe it because I have seen it. Some people may question that, but according to Norse beliefs, there are two types of shapeshifting. There's changing your physical appearance, and then there's another one where there's sending your spirit into another body and then taking control of that body.
That is two. There is another.
Oh, there's another one. Go ahead and feel free to say what the other one is. I didn't come across that.
The easiest modern term for it is astral projection, but the shape-shifting variation of that is where you turn into a spirit form in the form of an animal, and then you travel the world or the different planes.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much it.
Interesting. Now, as far as the one where it's sending your spirit into another body, usually that would be an animal and not so much a human. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, why would you say that is taking on is it because it would be much more difficult to control going into a human instead of an animal?
Well, I mean, out of all the instances and documentations of people being possessed in the world, it's like two people fighting over the same body.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I popped into your body, I probably would not be a pleasant experience for either of us, because it's like, hey, let me control. No, get the fuck out. No, let me do this. No, I'm gonna fight with you. You're gonna fight with me, and it's basically spirit rape. There's no better way to explain it for humans. But animals are far less sophisticated than the human mind. It's not saying animals are dumb. It's just when it comes to it, if I was to possess a dog, the dog would probably just move over, because a dog stares at a sunset and sees a sunset. It sees a beautiful sunset, and that's all it thinks about in the moment. Humans are constantly trapped between the present, the future, and the past. It's part of why we're so obsessed with the three sisters of fate in Greek mythology or in Norse mythology. And humans have anxiety because they're constantly worried about the future. Humans have depression because they're constantly thinking about the past. And the secret is trying to figure out how to live in the now. But if you don't think about the future, you're going to get screwed over. If you don't remember the past, you're going to get screwed over. So how do you find that happy middle ground? Animals don't think about that.
Right.
If an animal's thinking about the future, he's like, it gets cold every time around this time of year, so I should probably start digging a little deeper and prepping for winter. Like, that's the most you're going to get out of an animal when it comes to thinking of the future. Like, there's all kinds of studies that show that animals are more intelligent than we give them credit for. I mean, there's instances where chickens will give, like a rooster will give a hen food, and it'll walk away knowing that it can come back and mate with that hen, because it's thinking of the future. It's like, I did something nice for her, she's gonna remember that.
Right.
And it's thinking in the future. It's trying to, I don't know, date. I don't know a better term for it, but it's preparing for the future in its own way.
I think that's kind of like embedded in nature in general, as far as, those who reproduce, because it's in nature for us all to reproduce, and just do what's best for that.
30% of all human psychology is based around sex.
It doesn't surprise me at all.
We're animals.
Yeah.
And if humans became more accepting of sex, there'd be less problems. Like, you look at any culture that suppresses sex, there becomes all kinds of major issues inside the psyche. I mean, most of the most religious sects in the world have that kind of an issue, where when they go away from it, they go and experiment hardcore. But you have anybody who's like, yeah, no, sex is sex. And then they go out, they have some fun, and they're more likely to put a condom on. They're more likely to use contraceptives and be safe. Like, what is it? The Amish have Rumspringa. I might have it wrong. It might be the Mennonites, but there's a term called Rumspringa, and that's where once the kids hit a certain age, they're allowed to go out into the world and experience life. They go get drunk, they get stoned, they do drugs, they fuck like rabbits, and it's just one big fucking party for them. Most of the time they go back, though, because they're allowed to go experience it. It's not condemned.
Right.
So you have that extreme variation on both sides, but it still kind of points to that whole, you still need to know what it is to be you. and I can't stop you, but you have to make the decision for yourself. Most of them go back because they want a simpler life. Some of them come out and they still go live the rest of their life, but they have to be cut off from their family when they do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a trade. But back to the whole shape-shifting with the animals thing and being possessed, because they don't have such a sophisticated structure, it's more likely to be easier to take over one of their bodies than it would be another human. And that's actually very common in shapeshifter lore. You'll see there's a lot of stories where they'll possess a deer and they'll have it bash its own skull against a rock in front of somebody, and then it'll stand upright, and then they can hear inside their head the projected voice of Skinwalker. And it's just like, that is some creepy ass shit.
That is
something like that.
That's so interesting. That's kind of like if you have an electronic that's like it's not working properly, you just bash it against the wall and then it gets working. It's kind of the same concept, right?
But imagine how much easier it would be to hunt if all you had to do is just possess it and then bash its skull against the fucking tree until it's all over, and then take it somewhere to die.
Right.
When you can walk the animal to your own commune and then strap it up from there, and it's already bleeding out. You can have one of the others slit its throat, and then you're free of that, and you don't have to hunt. You just
it wouldn't surprise me that those who practiced this back in the day actually did that type of magic for food.
It wouldn't surprise at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing I thought was interesting is that this type of magic is not unique to people in that area. I mean, the Native Americans are well known for doing the same type of magic where they, their spirit goes into an animal and then they can see what the animal sees and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it seems to be pretty common among people, among the different cultures.
Well, imagine how useful that would be back in those days to be able to just possess a bird and fly above and get a bird's eye view of everything. Like, they kind of hint at the idea of that same type of thing in the Assassin's Creed games. Like, what if we were actually able to unlock that skill? There's so much of our brain we haven't been able to fully tap into, and then the few of us that can, we don't know how to replicate it so that it can be mass produced. Like, the secret to any knowledge is being able to mass produce it, because only then do you know how to simplify it.
That makes sense.
And most of these are not mass produced because they're secrets. We don't want everybody knowing how to do the one thing that gives us an edge over the other tribe.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is why a magician never reveals all his secrets.
Well, yeah, how horrifying would it be if a magician on the planet could make skinwalkers?
Mm-hmm.
You'd have a lot of trouble on your hands.
So it's like, you could say this is kind of like, people in that time period. It's like their version of using a drone to fly over and see everything.
Very possible.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you say that it's accurate that berserkers were thought to have had the ability to shapeshift also?
So one of the forms of Hammerseither, or shape-shifting, or shape magic, or however that fully translates, because a lot of the terms are rather loose. Hammer essentially means the shell. It's talking about the body, the physical shape. Because we have the spirit that's inside. We have all of that. Our mind is up here. That's Hugr. And then Hammer is the shell. Well, when you have the ability to influence your shell, with Berserker shape-shifting, it's different. We don't turn into a werewolf. We don't turn into a werebear. But we gain a lot of that power from that totem. And as a result, other people see something different, and most of them don't know how to explain it. So back in the day, my ancestors would don the wolf pelt. They would find a wolf in the wild and it would be dead. They would harvest the pelt. We didn't hunt the wolves because they were sacred to us. But
Right.
when you find a dead wolf, you harvest its pelt and you wear its pelt and you gain its power. You become more in tune with its spirit. And as a result, when you're raging, if you don't have the pelt, you're still a berserker. It's just like when I've raged and when my mom's raged and everyone else in my family has, everyone that has ever seen it happen always talks about how horrifying the experience was. The only term that's ever escaped anybody's mouth is it's like you turned into a monster. I don't know how to explain it. I have watched when this happens to either me or anyone in our family that's done it. The energy just magnifies, and we're pulling it from everywhere around us. We're pulling it from the universe and the people around us. But what's interesting is in the history books and what I've seen in my family is that we power each other. We feed off of each other's energy, and that magnifies. It's kind of like if you put a bunch of magnets together, it increases that magnitude.
Okay, interesting. Now, let's talk a little bit about the difference between Galder and Seder. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Galder is like a chant or an incantation. And then Seder is sort of like a divination, but then they also used it for, affecting the weather, causing sickness, basically. Would you say that's kind of like a good way of explaining the difference?
Yeah, actually. Galder basically just breaks down to chanting, anything that's verbal. There's a Swedish herd call called Kulning. You've probably heard it or seen it on YouTube, but you can always look it up. It's Kulning. And Kulning is typically only done by a woman because very few men can actually hit that tone. And in a lot of the videos, you'll see when the woman does the Kulning, it sounds like a very beautiful yodel. It's almost chanting. It's like a siren's call. Well, when a woman does this in Sweden, she can have the cows walk right to her.
Wow.
And I've watched videos of this where it's not just cows, it's ducks, it's geese, even swans. And there's stories of goats and sheep doing the same. So you have this ability to chant a tone, a sound wave out of your vocal cords that's so beautiful that it just enraptures animals. And they trust you unconditionally in that moment. Like, that sounds like me.
That's, it's almost as if sometimes the spirits do that to humans, because there's been times when it's been windy outside, but yet I can hear, like, let's say I'll be at home and the window's open and it's windy and you hear that, but I can hear a woman's voice in the wind saying stuff, you know what I mean? And calling, you know what I mean?
In Irish lore, those are called banshees.
Yeah. So it's kind of like they do that to people as well. Look at what people say supposedly about sirens, you know what I mean? When they call out to men, when they're out in the middle of the ocean, it's night, and they're calling, hey, help me, I'm over here. It's kind of the same thing.
It's really creepy. There's all kinds of lore like that all around the world. I've had personal experience with banshees. Multiple, and I've gotten so accustomed to their tone, their feel, their energy is very unique from other spirits. And they're not a good omen. They're not a good omen. It's very creepy. It's not like someone in your house is going to die, but it's just oftentimes bad things are about to happen, and usually death follows. And death can be a good thing. But usually when this happens, it's like the spirit world sends them to go, hey, go let that guy know somebody important's about to die. He needs to get ready for that because it's going to be painful.
Mm.
And sure as shit, that's how it happened. I have been fortunate that not all of the times they showed up, it was a friend that died, but there's always something bad that happened. And it's pain of the heart, because I mean, when I found out that I was going to lose my second kid, that's what happened. Banshees showed up. It was just like any other windstorm, but there was something about it that night in my particular area, and I could hear them. And they were all around the house. I even went outside, and sometimes you can see them, sometimes you can't. That night I couldn't, but I could sure as fuck feel them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. We're kind of trailing off of the topic, but
right. Well, as far as Galder goes, would you say that most of it was in rhyme or poetic? It was poetic. The kind of poetic they call Galdralag.
It's hard to go into Galder as just one or the other, because there's so many different variations of it. Galder is the broad spectrum of chanting magic, period. If you have rhyming magic, it makes it easier to, hit your brain right. And if your job is to serenade the spirits, well, then rhyming sometimes sounds nicer. But if it's a spirit of wisdom, it might not always be necessary to rhyme. But if you look at Old Norse poetry, it was done in what were called kennings, and they had syllabuses. I'm using the wrong word. Forgive me for that. But it had to be 10 syllables long for each line in the verses. And kind of like a haiku has the certain numbers and so on. But this one, it was 10 each. And if it wasn't exactly 10, you did it wrong. And it makes you have to think. And being a sorcerer yourself, you know that the more you put effort mentally into a spell, the more powerful it'll be.
Right.
Because you're charging it while you're making the spell. And the same thing is said with poetry. That's why a lot of modern depiction of bards from the old days, they practiced Seidr. Bards were considered practically womanly in ancient times. They fucked everything that moved. That was like just what they were known for. They were charming. D&D actually got that right. And a lot of that has to do with they're practicing a type of magic that is both of the mind and of Galder. If I can project the perfect, most beautiful sonnet, the woman of my dreams will fall in love with me. Like, how many times do we hear that in Shakespearean lore, or the Age of Chivalry, where a bard or someone is trying to serenade his mistress with a song or a sonnet in the perfect way? Because if I can do it just right, she'll love me. And we knew this was a magic back then. It just stopped being called magic because of what we call the burning times.
Right. Well, the fact that they said it had to be 10, it just goes to show that they took numerology very seriously and incorporated it in their practice.
Oh, very much, most likely.
Yeah.
And with kennings, kennings are they're kind of replacement words. So, like, for example, saying blood swan is a lot easier to put extra syllables, calling it a blood swan for a raven. Or calling something a wound knee is another terminology for an arrow.
Okay. Now, speaking of Seidr, would you say that basically the rundown of it would be they would get into a trance-like state, they'd sing to call the spirits, there would be some drumming or rattling, and then there would be a staff involved, they'd be on a high platform, and then there would be people kind of traveling with them to help them out with that? Would you say that's an accurate description of how Seidr was practiced?
That is the most commonly known way of how it was practiced. Is everything you just listed is one big ass ritual. None of that is necessary. All of it's necessary. as practicing any magic, you could use just one tool, you could use no tool, you could use them all. It depends on what you're trying to do. The reason for the staff, though, I wanted to bring that one to your attention because Sather magic is weaving magic. I can't think of a better way to describe it, because me learning about Sather it's just that. It's weaving magic, because the trying to remember the terminology, the vulva or the volur,
right?
Those were seeresses and witches that practiced Sather. Sather was a type of divination magic, and the reason they would carry a staff is it originated with a type of staff that was used in weaving wool and flax and stuff like that. On the end of the staff, they'd have these rings that go all the way around and spool towards the centerpiece, and they would dip that into a vat filled with like boiled wool or flax, and they would run it around so that they could gather it all up. And then when they're done, they'd pull it out, dry it out, and spin it. And that's how they would generate threads, which eventually became string, which eventually became yarn, and so on. And the Norns, as well as the Greek fates, are always depicted as essentially witches that weave strands and strings of fate. Well, Sather is all about reading those strands and those strings of fate. So it's weaving magic. All divination is trying to figure out how the strands fit and finding ways. Every form of divination is just an interpretation of that.
Okay. Now let's move on to Galdrastafir. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. The magical staves. I'm sorry?
Galdrastafir?
Galdrastafir. Okay.
I'm probably butchering it too because I don't speak Atlantic. Anybody who watches this in the future that does, I apologize for butchering it. I still haven't learned.
As do I. But it's interesting though, this, all of this magic. But I know that these magical staves or symbols or sigils, primarily from Iceland. I know that there are some that maybe don't come from Iceland, but those who have been preserved, most of them are from Iceland, as far as my research tells me. This is they're magical symbols that basically from Scandinavian folklore, right? And is it true that they evolved from Germanic tradition of bind runes? Is that true?
Yeah, of course.
I
mean, if you look at ancient Egypt or ancient Hebrew sorcery, it all starts with different symbols, and they would combine the symbols. And after a while, they combined enough of them that they created sigils. And those sigils could be placed in different circles and patterns, and they'd create all kinds of other weird, wonky symbols. It's the same damn thing, just only using runes as a base. Now, after time, they learned that different lines and different symbols, like the little crescent circle that goes like a U, you'll find on a lot of the Icelandic staffs. Most commonly is the Icelandic compass. A lot of people get confused with that one. If they've done their research, this is just a review, but essentially it was just a bind symbol that was designed to keep people from getting lost in the storm. That's all it was good for. And it served its job. If you have to navigate in the winter or anywhere up north and you're going to get lost and it storms, it's going to fucking suck. So you kind of need something like that. It's not surprising that's one of the most famous ones.
Sort of like their version of a compass, basically.
In a way. It doesn't face north, south, east, or west. It's just, it was called the Icelandic compass. I believe it was the Vegavisir. I know I butchered that. But if you take all of the runes and you take time to create different sigils, like once you know and memorize and have meditated on them to feel and understand what each of the runes means, you can then combine them to test them and see how they work. Once you know how to do that, then you can start figuring out which ones like each other, which ones don't like each other, how to get the ones that don't like each other to work with each other, and so on. Like if I put fire and water together, that's not going to work. But if I put fire under a pot and put the water in there, I now figured out how to get it to work together by putting something inside or in the middle. Like it's the same thing. It's what we call alchemy, but with symbolism.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way of putting it. Now, most people associate these with the Vikings, but is it true that they actually don't come from from that time period?
Actually, yeah. That's one of those really weird misconceptions. That so you have a bunch of witches that are out there practicing, and eventually they're not allowed to worship the gods. Now, they were clearly practicing in secret, but after a while, it got so hard to practice in your basement, especially with how bloody of a crusade Christianity was against anything pagan. These people were still practicing a lot of their magic and sorcery. And you're kind of isolated on an island up north that wasn't exactly easy to get to. And so even though the Christians that went up there were pretty much all old school Vikings that converted, they knew how to get there and they didn't mind hardship. But Christianity kind of breeds complacentment. And so we live in that gray area of out here is the hard times. We don't want the hard times. We want the good times. And so you keep pushing towards this mentality of we want to avoid the hardship. Paganism breeds hardship. Like they would sacrifice their own family as an honorable thing to give to the gods. And you had to deal with that heartbreak all the fucking time. Imagine giving birth to your first child and then having to give that up to the gods the first time because you wanted to have a lot of kids. And then you have lots of kids. It could mean you're just fertile, or maybe the gods were nice and didn't want your kids to die off. Suddenly the plagues lifted because everybody sacrificed their kids. We don't know. But regardless of that, you had to deal with some really fucked up shit back then. People died from the worst of things. And as we got smarter and wiser, the church was studying everything. They were trying to figure out how to stop all the bad shit. Because if everybody's happy, they're less likely to revolt and so on. But with everybody becoming so complacent with a peaceful mindset, it's all about love and peace, not violence against my neighbors because they're assholes. I have to turn the other cheek and all that shit. Well, it becomes less of a tumultuous time. And so nobody wanted to go up fucking north because that's a hard goddamn trip. At least that's my theory. But they still practiced in isolation, even though they were doing it as Christians. Even to this day, people will still cut off the head of a horse or a fish in order to practice what's called a neathing curse up there, because he didn't want the other elected official to win over him.
Wow. That's crazy, man. So would you say that Galdrastafir basically just means magic writing?
So there's a difference between Galdur and Galdra. Obviously, Galdur is the chant. I have my notes here for this reason. Let's see. Galdur, Gondur. Okay, yeah. So Galdur is the chanting magic. Songs, chants, great chanting, songs, etc. Gondur is just a word for sorcery.
Okay.
If that helps.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I know that there's currently a temple being built in Iceland that's been in construction since, I guess, the early 2010s. It's supposed to be like the first temple to Norse paganism or the Norse gods since the Viking times. Would you say this has a big spiritual significance for those who practice this type of magic?
Oh, I have no doubt. Like, I think it'd be cool to do just a pilgrimage up there at some point for anybody that practices. You going to bed?
Yeah.
Oh, be safe.
No. So, I mean, I really don't know too much about it other than it's still under construction, but it's definitely something I'm looking forward to when it does get completed. I wouldn't mind taking a trip up there at some point.
Anybody that practices the occult should pay some form of a pilgrimage to anywhere they're drawn to, at least once, just to experience and feel the energy. As long as people are respectful to it as a holy place, I think it's awesome. The moment people are disrespectful to it, oh, they deserve everything coming to them. I'm not saying that people should do anything. I don't want that coming back on me, but just because everybody bitches about everything nowadays. But karma's a bitch. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's basically sums it up, man. Now, let's talk a bit about a video you had sent me a couple days ago, and I thought that was interesting. And basically the message was like, we have to believe in, like, it's good to believe in stories and fairy tales so that you can, so that things that don't, like concepts that don't exist, like, okay, so take for instance about the grinding down, you can grind down the universe. He was saying you can grind down the universe, but you won't find one atom as far as like justice goes, or I don't know. I probably did a bad way of summing it up. How would you sum up that video that you sent?
You can, I think he said something along the lines of, you can grind down to the smallest atom and molecule, and you will never find one molecule or even smallest particle of justice or mercy in the universe. So when you understand universe shows no mercy, it is ruthless. It doesn't give a fuck about you. It doesn't give a damn about me. I had my kid taken away from me and nobody mourned. I'm the only one that did. And the world kept spinning. My best friend commits suicide. The world kept spinning. Like, shit happens. Like, you have to acknowledge that these terrible things exist. So how the hell do you keep going? When life keeps hammering away at you, how the hell do you keep going? You have to find something to believe in. There was a movie that was based off the TV series Firefly called Serenity. There's a point in there where this guy keeps going back. He's a diehard atheist. He's like, I don't like, quit preaching to me. Fuck you and your God. I don't care. I can't believe in good faith that God exists because of the horrors of war that I had to see, and he would allow that to happen, blah, 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 blah. In the end, his friend is dying, and he's like, no, don't die. I need you. I still look forward to many of your sermons. Like, if I have to listen to more of that shit, that's fine. You stay alive. Like, that's how much this person means to him. And then he grabs him by the head like this, and he's like, look, I don't give a fuck what you believe. Just believe. That was all he was trying to teach him. He's like, I don't care what you believe, just that you do believe. It doesn't matter if you believe in Odin. It doesn't matter if you believe in Freya. It doesn't matter if you believe in Amun Ra or Anubis. It doesn't matter if you're one of Hecate's little fangirls. It doesn't matter which one of the demons, angels, gods, or God or devil. It doesn't matter who or what you believe, just that you believe in something. It doesn't even matter if you believe in them, just that you do believe that there is something, that there is a meaning to all of this, that it serves a purpose, because to believe that it means nothing means that it had no purpose. Mm-hmm. Even if it was just to satisfy somebody who was bored in the void.
And I think that when times get really, really hard in life, we do need to believe in something. You know, we have to, otherwise, I know there's some people I know that if I didn't have belief in this and that, I would lose it, you know, and that's very, very true.
Oh yeah, for real. Like, if I didn't have my beliefs, I don't know where I'd be or what kind of a monster I'd
be. Which is why I don't knock people who, you know, if they are religious, that's fine. That works for them. That's their belief. You know, I believe they can still do spiritual practices, you know, similar to how we do. It's just that occultism seems to work for us, you know, and I don't really like to judge people who, believe differently than we do.
I mean, some of the best spiritual conversations I've ever had were with Christians.
Same here.
And when you have one that is open-minded and willing to listen, it's like, this is what I've seen and this is what I've experienced. Like, I'm not knocking your God. Just, this is what I've been through. And they go, so, and then they ask questions. And they don't ask in a, so you're saying you believe in fake shit. No, it's, so I'm not understanding what you're saying. Please explain this to me. Okay, da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so you're saying this happened. Exactly. They're coming from you like a child that is inquisitive, wants to know more. And these people are more likely to be the types of people that will come to any of the occult meetings that aren't, sacrificing a goat on the table or anything, but they'll still come and listen to what you have to say. And they'll be like, maybe I needed to hear that. Maybe that was just something I needed to see. But opening your mind to other things is actually a big part of Norse paganism. Like, Odin wanders because he wants to learn more. The secret to true power is knowledge and wisdom. The more you possess, the easier it is to win your battles. And oftentimes the best way to win a battle is to win it before it's ever fought. If you can win a battle without striking any blood, you're a damn good general. Simple as that.
I agree.
Yeah, Sun Tzu said it best. The one who loses the least men on both sides is the greatest general. If you can win a war without shedding a single drop of blood and conquer your enemy, you are the greatest general.
Well said. Well said. And yeah, man, it's been a great conversation. And once again, I encourage everyone to check out Shinna's group, Odins Wolves Kindred. Link below in the video description. And at some point, you'll see some cross promotion between Dark Sorcery and Odins Wolves Kindred. I know that me and Shinna discussed some things. In fact, his group is not just something that's on Facebook. It's also physical. I mean, I myself, when I'm able to, I meet with Shinna in his group, and we have a little devotion, a little spiritual conversation. I will be doing more of that in the future. But yeah, everyone click on the link below in the video description and join his group, Odins Wolves Kindred. And everyone who's watching, like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.
Yeah, and if you guys really are interested, we do meet up. We don't have a physical building yet, so we just meet at my place. It's here in Utah, here in Ogden, and I always post the address on the Facebook page. So if you really do want to come, just looking for it if you're interested.
Yeah, if you guys are interested, you can come to that location. You can physically meet up with Shinna and myself, So
and we've just recently changed our days that we meet from Sundays to Saturdays because that works better for everybody now. And we meet every other week. Our next meeting I'm planning on doing on the 4th of January, the first Saturday.
Yeah, so everybody's welcome to come. And if you want more information on the time and location, you can join his group in the link description, and he'll be posting about it. But yeah, thanks again, Shinna, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.